It's absent, yes.
If we could ask everyone to take their seats, please. I'm mostly speaking towards the dais. I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of the Morristown Township Board of Education. The meeting is called in conformance with the Open Public Meetings Act with adequate notice provided as follows. Notice filed with the Courier Post, March 2nd, 2022. Notice filed with the Burlington County Times on March 2nd, 2022. I'd like to ask if we could have a moment of silence, but before we do, I'd also like to add somebody to consider during this moment of silence. I think we're all familiar with Officer Brian Wright, who's served our schools faithfully. Nothing's happened to Brian, but his mother passed away earlier this month. So if we could just keep Brian and his family in our thoughts as we have this moment of silence, that'd be appreciated. Okay, thank you, everybody. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, Mr. Heiser, would you please do the roll call?
Dr. Alberti. Mrs. Arcaro Burns.
Present.
Mrs. Fallows Macaluso.
Here.
Mrs. McCopolis.
Here.
Mr. Mono. Mr. Villanueva. Dr. Snyder.
Here.
Mr. Weeks.
Present.
Thank you.
Board has already met in executive session. So moving on, let's see, to routine matters. Can I have a motion for the approval of the minutes from the February 15th executive session and the February 15th regular meeting?
So moved. Second.
Any questions, concerns?
I just ask on the minutes that, and I talked to Mr. Heiser about this, that item F7, the vote for items F1 through 7 indicates that I abstained from all of them. And I only abstained from item 7. So I just ask that they be amended to reflect that.
Anyone else? Okay, so with the amendments that Mr. Villanueva noted, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? Okay. Any communications for the board? No. Okay. Seeing none, I will move on to President's remarks. So welcome. Thanks to all of those in attendance and those online. As many may be aware, we are citizen representatives elected to serve as stewards over the resources and policies of the school district. We also collectively, it's loud, we also collectively directly supervise one employee, Mr. Volpe. We all take our responsibilities very seriously and are committed to doing that to the best of our abilities. Currently, much of our focus has been on debating and voting on the new budget, which we're going to do tonight, negotiating a new contract with our teachers, paraprofessionals, custodians, and secretaries, and ensuring that this board is fully staffed and operating effectively, meaning we have a board member position to replace. Tonight, I want to provide an update on where we are with all three. So as I noted, we are currently in negotiations with the Morristown Education Association. As some of you may be aware, our current contract expires this year. The MEA and the board's negotiating committee have been meeting for the last 2 months or so to work out an agreement, work out a new agreement. And we have found agreement on some issues, but there are others on which agreement is currently eluding us. But we are still interested in working out a settlement. While I cannot go into specific details about those issues, I would like to talk about our approach to this process and our guiding sentiments, and also speak to you about what is not holding things up from the committee's end. It was also almost exactly 2 years ago that we were confronted with an unprecedented development in our lifetimes, a pandemic that presented a far-reaching and deadly challenge to our lives, our norms, our fortitude, our caring, and our spirits. When the decisions were made to pause much of what we took for granted in our daily lives and routines, we were forced to find new ways to cope, to overcome, and to persevere. Among the places where we found some of the hardest challenges were those that provided public services that all of us relied upon, namely education and healthcare. Certainly our businesses and other entities face challenges, but it was in those places where we were already working for the collective good that we strove to dig deeply, come together, and support our frontline workers as they took care of us. While our students were learning from home, we all got a closer look into what the learning and teaching process was. And many were surprised at what they found, discovering that it was perhaps more challenging than they recalled or expected. As the child of two public school educators and someone who worked in K-12, who has worked in K-12 education for over 20 years, the experience was not new to me. However, it reinforced my appreciation for what our educators do for our students and each other on a daily basis. So from my perspective, the differences that remain are not over our appreciation for how much we value our teachers. As I have been trying to represent here, we absolutely do value them. I know that to a person, those on this board have respect and admiration for what our educators do. I'm a product of this community and these schools, and am thankful for what the individuals who are part of it have done to provide the educational foundation on which I have thrived. I, and those of us here with children in the district, trust them to also provide that experience for them as well, for our children. I also respect and value this district enough to volunteer my time and efforts to be a steward at this district, of this district's continued growth and success. And it is in that role as stewards that we are striving to find a way to balance the care for our current and future educators and the district as a whole. I wholeheartedly believe we can and will find a path forward, primarily because we must. I also believe that there is a desire and openness from this board and the MEA to continue to find creative solutions, and we will ultimately succeed in doing so. Related to this is the larger issue of the budget as a whole. In conjunction with feedback from the board, this administration has provided an example on finding creative solutions with the budget proposal we will see tonight. I do not want to steal any of the thunder from Mr. Volpe or Mr. Heiser in their presentation. However, I will say that I am encouraged by what they and the rest of the individuals involved in the process have achieved. I hope that appreciation is demonstrated by the board during our upcoming vote. Not only is the budget that will be proposed balanced, it also contains new and enhanced programs that are aligned with our strategic goals of providing a world-class learning environment for our students. In an era of constrained resources, increasing costs, and the ongoing challenges of preserving the unparalleled learning experience that Morristown is known and respected for, I believe that we are on the right path with this budget and these negotiations. A final note, we will have a special board meeting on April 5th, where we will interview candidates to fill a current board vacancy. The goal will be to have someone seated at or close to the April 26th board meeting. So thank you. Those are my comments. Turn it over to Mr. Volpe. Oh, yeah. Oh,
I'm sorry.
yeah. It's educational highlights first. And then.
Sorry, I forgot the order momentarily. Before I get to my comments, I just wanted my prepared comments. I want to say that we have a lot of success in this district, and I witnessed some of that success on Sunday. I would love to point out every wonderful thing that every student does and everything that we have achieved. I'm not there all the time, and I'm aware of these things, but on Sunday, I got to go to the Rutgers Athletic Center and see our unified basketball team win the state championship in convincing fashion. More impressive than the score that I saw were the efforts that the kids gave and the sportsmanship that they showed. And it was thrilling to be there in the middle of the parents who got to see their kids up on the big screen. They did slow motion replays when our kids made a basket. And it was really tremendous to see some of our staff members out there coaching these students on a Sunday, pretty far. It's pretty close to me, the Rutgers Athletic Center, but it's quite the drive there. And I just really wanted to recognize those students and those staff members for those outstanding efforts. It was just because I got to see that in person that I wanted to say what an impression that made on me. I don't want to short anyone else who accomplished anything during this sports season, but I just wanted to point that out. Some other big topics to talk about tonight. And one of the things I'm happy to report is that our internal data relative to COVID looks extremely promising. As you may remember, before our last board meeting, I met with the other Burlington County superintendents, New Jersey Board of Health, County Board of Health, our administrative team, our school nurses, board leadership, our school attorney, and our school physician. After much discussion and deliberation, it was decided to keep current protocols as is through the month of March in order to compare COVID transmission data in schools in a state of mask mandate versus mask optional. Since that time, I have continued to meet with the aforementioned stakeholders, as well as solicit continued input from each board of education member. After an additional meeting with our school nurses, I am anticipating that by the middle of next week, it is likely you will get another communication from me announcing the removal of restrictions pertaining to COVID protocols, the most significant of which will be the discontinuing of contact tracing and the end of students being forced to quarantine if they are not sick. There are still some details to be worked out between now and then, all of which will be communicated to you. However, this is one step closer to a return to normal for students, and is my hope and my sincere desire to continue to move in that direction. So pay attention to things next week. As you may also know, the Board of Education continues to look for ways to improve our communications with stakeholders and the community at large. To this end, we are taking multiple steps. First, we have recently sent out a survey to families, staff, and the community about our current communication practices. If you have not done so, please fill out the survey, which should take no more than 15 minutes. And a link is available on the homepage of our website. If you could help us encourage others to do so, that would be appreciated. Furthermore, the leadership of the Morristown Township Public Schools values the opinions and inputs of students, staff, parents, and community members on any topic. We welcome such engagement and are continuously looking at multiple ways in which to foster that environment. Recently, we have created a Google form where members of the community can provide input as to items you would like to see addressed in the superintendent's report or the board president's reports. It is currently active on the Meet the Board of Education page of our website, but we're looking to see if that's the best place or not. And I will publicize the fact that we have this in my email version of the superintendent's report this week. Finally, on April 12th at the Community House from 6:30 p.m. to 8 p.m., I will be hosting my first town hall, and Mr. Weeks will be my special guest. And it will be moderated by two of our very own high school seniors, Layla Riemann and Colin Llewellyn. Soon, if interested, you'll find ways to submit questions in advance of the town hall, as well as how to ask a question in person if you are attending. This will be a great opportunity for me to get to know the community better and have some of your questions answered in a more informal format than a board meeting. We often say here, it's not a time for question and answer. April 12th would be a time for me to go back and forth with you and answer your questions. Tonight, the board will be voting on our preliminary budget. The budget process is a long and arduous one, but also extremely thoughtful. In its considerations, the board's goal was to be as fiscally responsible as possible and still deliver the outstanding education that Morristown is known for, while keeping an eye on the future. Indeed, this budget tonight shows that the board is looking forward to ways that we can enhance the educational experience of our students. Considerations were given that could have led to a slightly smaller overall budget. However, doing so would have compromised many of the things that makes Morristown, Morristown. This board was not interested in compromising transportation for certain students. This board was not interested in eliminating extracurricular activities for students, especially in a world where we need to become more social again and not less. Most importantly, this board was not interested in cutting the people and programs that are unique to Morristown. So what will this board be considering when voting on the budget tonight? Essentially a commitment to our values and parts of our interrupted strategic plan. Later during Mr. Heiser's presentation, I'll be the speaker for a few of the slides as I highlight a continued commitment to the mental health and well-being of our students in a post-pandemic time, making sure that we are meeting students where they are educationally in the foundational years, a commitment to making improvements in student technology, technology infrastructure, professional development, and curriculum writing. These are all keys to the outcome we want, which is a world-class education for students. Make no mistake about it. Each individual member of this board had and still has their own point of view about the budgetary process. Really difficult questions were asked and answered. In the end tonight, the board will vote, and regardless as to what the count of that vote is, the board will speak with one voice and take the next steps in the evolution of the Morristown Township Public Schools. And again, for everybody who always comes, I appreciate you coming out and watching all this work in action tonight. Now, Mr. President, that concludes my superintendent's report.
Thank you, Mr. Volpe. All right, now for what everybody came for, the student reports. Yeah. Right? Oh, I'm sorry, the budget. Oh, you guys want to see the budget? No. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Claire, honestly, what do you think?
Got some homework tonight. So
Go ahead, Ms. Harron.
it's, still cool. Hello, everybody. My name is Claire Hurin. I'm a big budget fan. However, I am also the senior class liaison to the Board of Education. And tonight I will be talking about senior trip. which I do talk about every month, but I actually have updates this month to share with you. On Monday, we had, or Monday or Tuesday, I think it was last night. So Monday. Today's Tuesday? Yes, Monday. Whew, it's a lot going on. We had our pre-Disney trip meeting. It's a Universal trip though, so they have to qualify that in every speech. So we had our meeting and it was really informational. Each student had to bring at least one parent, and they had a little question and answer at the end with a brief overview of everything that's going on. There are 2 separate flights down to Orlando and back. One on Southwest, which is completely chartered, so it's all MHS. And then there's one on Spirit, which is later that day on April 2nd, is the day we leave. So that'll be mostly MHS students with 14 best friends that Mr. Seibel was calling them last night. So I'm super excited. Our room assignments have been released, our flights. I'm on the earlier flight, which is nice. Get my tan going in Orlando in preparation for prom, which Peyton will talk about later. But we're super excited. The meeting was pretty great. My dad did recognize some jokes from 4 years before though. So Mr. Seibel may need to update his material a little bit. The one thing that I picked up the most was do not prank call, which it hadn't occurred to me until he told me. So we'll see if it happens or not. Yeah, it was really good. Super excited. So we leave April 2nd and then we come back on the next Thursday night around 11 o'clock p.m. It was really, told to us, you have to be there on Friday. You have to be there the day before. So I'm sure everybody will be there from the senior class the day after the trip. And also I'm here to talk about the senior class service project that we've been doing. All the other grades have completed their service projects for the year. The seniors were still about to kickstart it. I think it's going to happen after the senior trip, but we are running a book drive for Book Smiles in Cherry Hill. I'm in this reading phase right now where I'll read like 10 books and I won't read for 3 months. So I'm in that right now, but I'm buying a bunch of books. So I'm super excited to participate in our book drive to, share the wealth and donate something back to the community. I know everybody's really looking for a lot of YA rom-com novels, so they'll be getting a large shipment pretty soon from me. But I'm really excited to participate in the community and finally, follow up our 3 successful drives with one from the seniors. And I'm going to pass it off to Peyton. Thank you very much.
Hello. Happy second day of spring. So I'm going to talk about 3 things tonight, and they all have to do with prom. So first, I'm going to talk about the junior service project, which we did a prom drive, and we ended up collecting a little over 100 beautiful and wonderful dresses that can all be used for prom. So I'd like to do a special thank you for everyone who donated. So we will be donating to our school, and we're also going to send about 20 to 30 dresses to one of the schools in the Camden School District to donate to other communities in need. The next thing, on Thursday, we are going to bring back the prom fashion show. So basically during all of the lunches, there's a group about 10 boys and girls are going to do a prom fashion show, which is going to promote the Formal Expressions Prom and Tux shop in Maple Shade. So it's just a fun event to get people excited about prom. Then the real event happens on May 13th. It's going to be at the Crown Plaza, which is not the Crown Plaza anymore. Doubletree. It's going to be at Doubletree. And it's a beautiful hotel. We have a theme, but it's a secret. So you'll find out soon. And yeah, it's on Friday the 13th. So that should be interesting. That's all I have to say about prom. Passing it off.
Thanks, Miss Emil.
Hi, everyone. I'm Bhavika, the sophomore class liaison. So for our service project, we chose to donate to Wolf Love Rescue. And this is a foster home and a dog rescue organization. They work with Animal Aid USA, which is a volunteer organization that goes to Georgia every 28 weeks to rescue abandoned and unwanted dogs. And these dogs are then given to Wolf Love Rescue as their foster home. So one of our class advisors, Mrs. Furlong, actually is a volunteer for Wolf Love Rescue. So we decided this would be the perfect organization for us. And our service project lasted from February 28th to March 4th. So freshmen had the task of bringing in dog treats. We got to bring in used or new towels. Juniors got to bring in dog food, and seniors were given dog treats. Overall, it was a great success. We collected a total of 75 items, which is absolutely amazing for our drives. And Mrs. Furlong will be bringing these items to Georgia April 1st, so coming up. And so they're really excited to receive all of our shipments because we can do whatever we can to help these foster homes, since a lot of times they don't receive a lot of donations. So the sophomore class is really excited to be able to do something to help our fellow community, even if it's not humans directly. And yeah, we're really excited about that. Looking all the way into the future till graduation, Student Council has started to discuss graduation and how we can play a role in the ceremony to make sure our seniors have a memorable and successful graduation. So we will be selling waters and flowers at graduation to raise money. And overall, we are just very excited to be there for our seniors and help them and make sure they have the best graduation possible and a bit of a more normal graduation. So yeah, thank you.
Good morning. Oh, I'm so used to doing the announcements. Good evening, everyone. My name is Yvette, and I'm the freshman class liaison. I'm here to talk to you about two things today. The first thing is the event that we're planning on hosting at the end of the year. So last year, because of COVID, we hosted our pep rally in the spring towards the end of the year, and all the students had a blast, and they really wanted to do it again. So with popular vote, we are planning on doing a similar event, which is like something like pep rally, which would be at the end of the testing week in May. Then the second thing is the student council end of year activity. So this year we decided on going bowling, and our plan to raise money for our outing came from our senior class vice president, who suggested a 3v3 basketball tournament where the winner would get some sort of prize, and there would be a fee for entering, and then it would be just fun for everyone who competes. There'd be like a certain number of teams from every grade, and then playing against each other, and then the overall winner would get the prize. And then student council members would volunteer there, and some teachers would help out as refs and to supervise too. Hopefully the money we raise will be enough for us student council members to take a well-deserved break, as we work very hard and we all like to eat a lot. Thank you.
Thanks as always to the students. We really appreciate your insight, perspective, and kind of reminiscing a little bit about the stuff we went through in high school. So anyway, thanks again. You're welcome to stay for the budget presentation. Ms. Hurren, you're on record as being a fan of the budget. But if not, if there's homework, please feel free to excuse yourselves. But thank you again. All right. All right, we'll move on so we don't notice y'all leaving. Mr. Heiser.
Thank you, Mr. President. Dylan, can you pull the presentation up for me? While Dylan's in the process of doing that, I'd like to just start by thanking the board, our central administration, our building administrators, our faculty and staff. The budget process is never a simple one. It's a long and arduous process that hopefully culminates tonight with a vote, with the board speaking together and moving forward the budget so I can submit it to the county. So I will go into the budget introduction. So what we will talk about is the development process, the process that we undertake to ultimately put together the budget. Obviously, it's divided into two areas, revenues and appropriations. So we'll talk in a little bit more detail of those areas. Our budget adjustments, those are the adjustments that we have made to ultimately balance the budget. Those adjustments could be to revenue. They also could be to appropriations. The bulk of those adjustments are to appropriations typically. However, we did have some favorable areas on revenue as well. We'll take a look at the actual budget introduction, which is where the budget stands as of today, what the board will be asked to vote upon, the tax impact of that budget, and then the budget highlights, which is the key initiatives within the budget for the 22-23 school year. So the budget development process. So the process starts out with the priorities of board committees and administration. So all of our board committees meet with our administrative teams and develop their priorities. Curriculum has its own priority. Our Finance and Operations Committee has a priority. So we develop those priorities and move the budget forward based off of those priorities. Our central administration evaluates the needs of the district related to technology, curriculum, personnel, and facilities. Our school administration, which is our school-based budgets, are developed based on the needs of faculty and content level supervisors. And then revenue and appropriations are updated over time based on finalized numbers. So typically in January, the budget process is a lot more of a fluid process, and it starts to be honed in through January, through February, and it really starts to heat up in March as we start to get finalized numbers. For example, tuition is a prime area where that number changes over time based off of what our student actual enrollment is, as well as the actual tuition rates that we receive from out of district entities of where the students are placed. And then obviously our benefits are another area that we put in projected amounts. And as time goes on, we get confirmed increases that then we can update the budget for. We obviously always try to project high, so we're not having to go back and cut. And we're in that process experiencing that we can go back and find some money in that process. So our budget calendar, which was approved by our Finance and Operations Committee, I believe it was back in October. Where we are at in that step right now, we're down at that third to last bullet point, March 22nd, budget introduction and approval. On March 8th, we held our budget workshop with the board, as well as on that same date, the governor's budget address was also that date. March 10th, we did find out our state aid number, which I'll speak to in a further slide. So what happens after today? If the budget is approved for me to submit it to the county, I submit it to the county. It's due by March 28th. The county then reviews it. It goes through a state approval process, and then they approve it to be advertised for the public, and the budget adoption and the public hearing is scheduled for April 26th currently. So our initial budget, when we started this process, and we started, this is the revenues that we started with. So after everything was said and done, we took a look at all of our building-based budgets, all of our capital outlay, everything needed in the district. We had revenues roughly of 78,695,396. Those revenues at that point in time are a rough estimate, because a lot you'll see in a further slide, you'll see a lot more increases and decreases, because obviously at this point in time, we didn't know our state aid number. We also don't necessarily have a good grasp of our tuition number when you start this process. So as time progresses, that's what I mean by it's a very fluid process. As time progresses, you get to hone that in. On our appropriation side, the key thing here, our appropriations, everything said and done, when the full budget was entered, we were 7.6 million over budget, inclusive of a 2% tax increase. So obviously that indicated to us right off the bat that we had a lot of work to do to cut the budget back to a balanced budget and to get somewhere where we could get a budget that can be put forward for approval. So to do that, we'll talk a little bit later about that, but I'm going to go into a little bit of detail on the revenues and appropriations, and then we'll talk about the adjustments that were made to cut down to a balanced budget. So our local tax levy, a 2% increase, is $1,344,664. Our state aid was originally budgeted flat. So that was what we saw 2 slides ago. A future slide will show there is a $518,219 confirmed increase from the governor's budget address, which was held on March 8th and confirmed on March 10th when the actual numbers were shared with us. Our budgeted fund balance. Budgeted fund balance is always this kind of confusing number that, you know, takes a little bit of an explanation, but our budget fund balance, what it is it's our prior year audited excess surplus. So our 2021 school year audited excess surplus, that's the number directly from our audit, plus allowable adjustments for any free general fund excess balances that are projected as of June 30, 2022. So ultimately, that's a $415,815 increase compared to the prior year that you'll see in a future slide as well. And then our other revenue sources. So our other revenue sources are primarily consist of tuition and then extraordinary aid and then facility rentals. We are projecting an increase of $68,318 in this area, which is primarily driven by increases with our preschool and kindergarten tuition rates. So our tax levy. Our tax levy is composed of two separate levies. There's a general fund levy and a debt service levy. Our general fund levy is our levy that accounts for our district's annual operating budget. It's our salaries, it's our benefits, it's supplies, it's everything we do as a school district in our normal operations. Our debt service levy accounts for paying off the debt associated with long-term capital projects that were previously approved in a referendum. So this is a 5-year view of our tax levy history. You can see that last year our increase on the general fund levy was 2.29%. Our debt service went down by 2.28% for a net of 1.98%. And then you can see down there at the bottom, the effective tax rate increase is 1.76%. So the effective tax rate increase is different than the levy increase because as ratables go up, there's more taxable properties within the community to spread that taxes across. So the effective tax rate is different than the levy increase by that amount. As ratables go up, the effective tax rate obviously goes down. So one thing that we did last year as well is we refinanced one of our issuances that came up for availability to refinance, which was our 2012 outstanding debt. Refinancing that, this is just a snapshot. The blue line was before our refinance. The orange line is after our refinance. So in the fiscal year 22-23, which is the budget that the board's going to be asked to vote on tonight, that equates to $90,544 in savings. That goes right back to the levy, coming right off the levy, how much we need to repay our debt service. So that there's another slide in the future that goes a little bit more into detail on that as well. So this is our state aid number. So when we did the budget workshop on March 8th, we didn't have our state aid number, so I couldn't update this slide for this. And I apologize because the one heading there should be 2023. But ultimately, what you see here, the green line is our uncapped aid, how much the district should receive in accordance with the funding formula, the way it exists. The blue line is how much we actually receive. The yellow line is the difference between the green and the blue line. Ultimately, Moorestown under S2 has historically been an underfunded district in accordance with state aid. So S2, the purpose of S2 is to narrow that and to bring us to the funding that we should be receiving year to year. So you can see that over the last 3 years, the green line is growing closer. The blue line is growing closer to the green line, and we want to see that trend continue. So that yellow line, we want to see that go all the way down to 0, and we want to see that blue line touch and meet that green line. This slide shows our other revenue sources. which is primarily consistent with prior years. Tuition, we do have a slight uptick in our tuition that we are expecting. Again, that's due to increasing our preschool and our kindergarten tuition rates. Facility rentals, there's a slight decrease. That's in anticipation for minimum wage requirements for some of our rental programs. Overall, the other governments, there's about a $50,000 increase there. That is primarily due to expecting 50,000 in additional extraordinary aid based off of our actual claims and applications that we've submitted in the past. But overall, relatively consistent year to year here. Appropriations, the MEA contract is set to expire on June 30th, 2022. We will be in year 3 of 3 with our MA contract. Insurance, we originally projected a 5% increase. Our health insurance was confirmed at a 2.62% confirmed increase. Our general insurance was confirmed at an 8.5% increase, and our student accident lines of coverage were confirmed at a 1% increase. Instructional supplies and materials, our school budgets came in at 0%. So no increase compared to the prior year. And our appropriations consist primarily of these 5 departmental budgets, which is our curriculum budget. There's a future slide on that goes into a little bit more detail that Mr. Volpe will cover. Technology, there's a little bit more detail that Mr. Volpe will cover about that as well. And then our administration, facilities, and transportation. And our capital outlay budget. Our capital outlay budget, when we were originally 7.6 million over, a little over $2 million was in capital outlay. That's an item every single year that, you know, we have requests that are put in there that we have to cut out. For example, one item that's included in there, has been included in there year after year, is the tennis courts, milling the tennis courts and repaving the parking lot as well behind the high school. Those 2 items amount to roughly $1,250,000. Those are just things that are hard to do in your operating budget that ultimately we have to cut out every year to balance the budget. But we still go through the process of including them in, because obviously at some point in time, we're going to hit a point where they're going to have to be done. Our appropriations, so some of the key items in our appropriations, our curriculum includes the adoption of new ELA curriculum for grades K through 5, professional development and curriculum writing. Special education budget includes some one-to-one nursing needs and related services. Technology, we have 2 grade level replacements of one-to-one devices, server and infrastructure upgrades, CAD computer replacements. Operations, increase anticipated for fuel and contracted transportation services. One of the biggest issues is minimum wage impact across several programs that we run. Substitute rate increases were made in 2021 that had to be accounted for in the 22-23 budget. We also increased our driver salaries in the 21-22 school year that had to be accounted for in the 22-23 budget. So this is a article that came out, I believe it was February 10th. Inflation surges 7.5% on an annual basis, even more than expected and highest since 1982. So we do a lot of creative things with our purchasing. We participate in state contracts where we can. We participate in county cooperatives where we can. The bulk, if not all, of our ordering, especially at the building level, is done through a system called Ed Data. That system is a global bid that's put out to get the best price for specifically for school materials. But we're not immune to what we see going on in the economy right now. Nobody's a stranger to pulling up to a gas pump right now and paying, $4 a gallon of gas. We're not immune to that. Yes, we can buy things in bulk and yes, we can get a better deal, but it doesn't mean that we're not going to see increased costs. So this budget also accounts for that. So our adjustments made to date to ultimately balance the budget. Tuition costs, originally we had budgeted a higher number than what was needed based on enrollment and where finalized tuition rates came in. So that led to about 570,000 in cuts there. Department and building level budgets were cut by 504,000. And again, building level budgets came in flat compared to the prior year. So these were new requests that were being cut, not existing items. Our capital outlay, there's that 2 million plus number there that we ended up cutting out from capital outlay. Our lease purchase was cut by 958,000 in requests, which resulted in 191,000 in annual payment. Our lease purchase is a 5-year lease purchase. So you cut $1 million out of it, you ultimately cut roughly 200,000 in annual payment. Staffing, our staffing was adjusted by 2,028,000. This is new positions being adjusted or removed from the budget. Those positions are found from within by looking at efficiency purposes, repurposing staff that can be used in other areas, retirements, leaves of absences, things along those lines. Benefit adjustments, 608,000 cut from benefits. Now, a portion of that is obviously as you cut a new position request, there is a benefit component of that. So the bulk of that is that. Our additional state aid. So we saw $518,000 increase in state aid and utilization of bank cap. So there's a future slide that goes into explaining what the amount that we're using in bank cap and ultimately what that is. And then other revenue adjustments, $68,318. That's primarily in tuition, taking a look at our tuition that we received from other districts and other individuals. So our current status. Now you see a lot more increases and decreases in the far right corner there, because as time goes along, we get a better handle on where our revenues are going to go. We have our confirmed number from the state aid. We put in an additional $50,000 in the extraordinary aid, an additional $95,000 in tuition, and so on and so forth. Budgeted fund balance, 415,000 there at the bottom. Our appropriations, we do have, the budget is now showing that it's balanced. Appropriations, 49 million in salaries, 16,500,000 in benefits, and then 15,172,000 in other expenditures. So our budget is now balanced. To explain bank cap was the bank cap that we are requesting utilization of was generated in the 2019-2020 school year. So in the 2019-2020 school year, we had what at that time what was called a healthcare benefit adjustment. So it was additional taxing authority that could have been utilized at that point in time to ultimately take our tax levy up to 64,747,000. That year, we only went to 64,194,000, which generated $552,824 of bank cap. In 2021, we used 168,000 of it. In 21-22, we used 190,000. In 22-23, we're requesting the use of 194,796,000. So the tax impact with the utilization of bank cap, our general fund tax levies going from $67,233,217 to $68,772,677. And our debt service levies going from $4,586,000 to $4,512,000 roughly. So you can see that decrease in our debt service there due to the refinancing. So ultimately, on the average assessed home of $457,793, the increase amounts to $122.08 a year. And at this point, I will turn it over to Mr. Volpe.
Thank you, Mr. Heiser. So I did want to point out a couple things here, and I tend not to read slides. Thank you for all the numbers, Mr. Heiser. I was an English teacher, so I want to tell a story on my slides. And the story is from what he said right there is, yeah, I'm asking for about $12.22 a month from the average homeowner. Some people that'd be a little bit more, some people that'll be a little bit less. Wish I didn't have to ask for that, but circumstances being what they are, I want to make sure that everyone understands that with the budget proposed, it's not just to keep Morristown the way it is. It's to keep it the way it is and to add value. So I'm going to talk about some things briefly on a couple slides that do connect to our strategic plan and are things that are certainly going to add value to the district. And the first one is Care Solace. We have been through very difficult times. Mental health is a priority for staff members, for parents, and also for students. And there are some times that the counselor in school or additional things we can do for kids simply is not enough. And we turn to parents and say, you may want to look at some outside resources. And if you've been the parent of someone trying to get outside resources for mental health in the middle of this, it's hard. It is extremely hard. By bringing Care Solace as a tier 3 intervention in our school, we are going to be able to direct you to people, they're not employees of the school, it's a service, who are going to help you make those connections, who are going to be that intervention for kids who are in crisis and for parents who don't know where else to go. That is going to be something that's going to be available to you. It's also going to be available to staff members. So it's significant that is being added there. And you can see all the things that it will certainly provide for us there. So that's one thing. Mr. Heiser, can you go to the next slide? Also, along with the lines of our strategic plan for world-class learning, with the previous one being social and emotional learning, we need to replace some things and upgrade some things when it comes to technology. You can't be a world-class learner if your things aren't working. And Mr. Ari, over time, has made things stretch. He has Frankensteined different laptops together to make things work. It's time to replace some things. Things come to an expiration date. We also want to upgrade our infrastructure as well as our security. So these are some things that we all want to touch upon as we keep moving forward. And my keep moving forward little insignia got cut off there, but we just want to keep moving forward with technology. Mr. Heiser, can you go to the next slide too? When it comes to world-class learning, we need to make sure that we are doing things in the area of curriculum and instruction in order to deliver that. We already have an outstanding teaching staff. So I've got the talent. I need to make sure that the talent has the right tools at all times. I believe our senior liaison made a joke at Mr. Seibel's expense about recycling a joke that was used 4 years ago with a younger sibling. Well, we don't want to have the same kind of joke going on in our curriculum. Times change, kids change, circumstances change. Curriculums need to change as well. And I would just point out, without reading it, that a couple of underlined ones. We're looking at 8+ new curriculum and 37 revisions and 9 standard updates that need to be done in order to be minimally compliant with what the state is saying we should do as far as standards go. And minimally compliant is not the Morristown standard. We will do the minimal compliance and we will excel beyond that. But you can't do one without the other. You got to build the foundation and move from there. We also want to arm teachers with the resources that they need and also provide plenty of opportunities for professional development as we keep moving forward. So that is all a very big initiative. And the biggest initiative is going to be on the next slide when it comes to curriculum. And this is our K-5 ELA curriculum adoption. And Dr. Benton, I promise you're not going to have to give another presentation on this. She's presented on this like 4 times. But having been an elementary principal myself for 10 years, the most important instruction we are going to give students, the most important, not the only important, is literacy during their elementary years. And you got to have the right program and you got to have the right people teaching it and you got to have the wherewithal to do it. And that's what we are looking to do. We are going to be implementing a new curriculum program that's going to affect a lot of students and a lot of teaching staff. Curriculum needs to be written for that, and I'm proud of Dr. Benton for looking into this and doing it cheaper than our previous revision, and it's honestly a much better program. So as we start to look at all of these things too, these are the new adds. This is what is adding value to our budgets. We are moving forward. We are going to keep moving forward. And it's my promise that as long as I'm here, every time that I'm asking people to pay for something, it's going to be for something more. So this budget that we are looking at tonight is tapping into our interrupted strategic plan that we need to figure out what we're doing over the next year or so with that. But we want to make sure we follow through on a couple of core principles. Number one, as I had mentioned, a commitment to social emotional learning of students and their mental health, and that world-class learning. And all of these things here can do that. And I believe that's my last slide, correct? Yes. So when it comes to this budget, we want to keep it aligned with our values, and we want to keep moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Heiser, Mr. Volpe. We'll have an opportunity to discuss the budget in more detail when we get to that line item later. But I will just say I appreciate not only the depth, but also the story that's being told, that we're continuing to consider, even with the challenges, how to continue to reinvent, reinvest in our organization. So thank you for that. All right, let's move on to board committee reports. So I don't know, we can start from my right. Lauren, if you want to go.
Sure. With the change of tonight's board meeting date, we actually had 2 curriculum committee meetings in between the last board meeting. The big discussion for our February 17th meeting was the adoption of the ELA K6, K through 5 curriculum that Mr. Volpe just discussed. So, and Dr. Benton gave a presentation on last month. We also looked at the priorities for curriculum in the current budget. Dr. Benton gave an overview of some of the changes to the spring PD calendar and was looking to develop professional development frameworks moving forward for how to implement then the new ELA K through 5 curriculum and provide the staff support so that the implementation next year went smoothly. And then we also looked to review the curriculum adoption process. And so that then led us to the March 17th meeting, in which we at the beginning reviewed the COVID protocols that Mr. Volpe announced at the beginning of the meeting. We looked at the WAMS program of studies that was presented by Ms. Caravano. At WAMS, they were looking to change the scheduling options to provide more opportunities for students to take exploratory arts courses that did not impact necessarily any of the program of studies being offered. It just was a different way of offering the current existing programs to students. We took a look at Care Solace, which Mr. Volpe shared on his PowerPoint, and the committee was in support of that additional program. We also looked at the curriculum adoption process, and Dr. Benton laid out a 5-year cycle that we would be looking at as a curriculum committee as a way of planning out how curriculum is presented and planned for going forward. Dr. Benton also reviewed new standards that we as a district needed to implement. Again, Mr. Volpe kind of touched upon some of the standards that were the reason for the curriculum writing needed and some of the curriculum changes. So we took a look at that. And then finally, we looked at how we were moving forward as a committee and as a district with our equity, diversity, and inclusion plans. Dr. Benton explained some of the new implementations this year with diversity and representation, giving more voice and choice to students, some of the professional development that's taken place this year, and also a look at how we were selecting curriculum resources moving forward in the future. She gave examples of work being done in the district this year that related to and reflected our district goals of, improving our equity and diversity. And that's about it.
Hey, great. Well, thank you, Ms. Romano. Dr. Snyder, if you want to do policy, please.
Sure. Policy Committee met on March 8th. The first thing we did was discuss the COVID-19 protocols that Mr. Volpe had just mentioned. The only additional thing, we talked about how policy 1648 would be impacted, and it was suggested to be put on a future policy committee meeting to sort of address any changes that would be necessary to 1648. We discussed a number of policies that are not on the agenda for first or second reading. The first of which was, again, 5530, which is the substance abuse policy. That is, again, tabled for a future meeting in light of the fact that it is currently under review from board attorney and administration to sort of take back those recommendations. The committee maintained the concern with sort of how various substances would be categorized and the level of discretion that would be available to administration within each substance category's specific discipline. Policy 2431.4 was the prevention treatment of sports-related concussions and head injuries. Again, that wasn't discussed other than to say that it was tabled for a future meeting after board attorney review. The policy 7540, which is the joint use facilities, is not on the agenda, and it was not recommended for adopting, as we do not have joint use facilities in Morristown. And policy 3233 was discussed, which deals with the use, it's about political activities and the use of facilities and time. The conversation was around the fact that there is a similar policy that is adopted dealing with support staff, 4233. And the conversation was around having 3233 and 4233 mirror each other. So instead of putting on this new policy for staff dealing with that, it was recommended to wait 1 month to have both policies, the one that deals with staff and support staff, so that they are identical in language. So they, again, will be on for a future meeting. The policies that are on for first reading tonight, there is one change, but 9180, which deals with school volunteers. This policy is around the requirement for school volunteers, regardless of hours of student contact, to have a background check, fingerprinting, which would be reimbursed by the school district. And it was very clear that the definition of volunteer does not include some person who occasionally comes into the classroom, chaperones a field trip, something like that. But it was removal of the hours as some delineator of student contact. And instead, this would be under the discretion of the building administrator or the superintendent to determine that a particular frequent volunteer who has student contact and has sort of authority in some purview would require a background check. A very similar policy, 9181, was discussed in response to volunteer athletic coaches, which is very similar. That was tabled as there is an additional component dealing with confidential matters and what that volunteer would be required to do if they learned so that was under attorney review and will come back. So that is not on the agenda. The anti-hazing, which is a mandated policy, 5541, deals with language changes. I'm sorry, no, that was the next one. This deals with specific how to handle hazing and how would be different. And it can also be HIB, but it would be specific to the high school and WAMs. And it would be the specific language around how it becomes a student code of conduct issue. And again, it can also be an HIB if the criteria are met. It would not include elementary, as that is handled under the code of conduct. And 8465, again, was a language change dealing with bias crimes and bias, removing the word hate and changing it to bias. And there are really no changes on any of the policies on for second reading. 2451 was there was a larger version put on for first reading. So the abbreviated version that's on tonight's agenda is the correct version on for second reading. Any questions?
Two comments. I think with respect to COVID-related policies, I think there's a series of them in the sort of 1648 range that the committee may want to take a look at and to explore how to deal with those as we continue to roll out of the pandemic. And then on the political activities policy that you had mentioned, so if I remember correctly, there's a policy that addresses political activities as it pertains to staff members. And there is a line in that policy that says that political activities will not take place at school facilities. There has been some discussion in the past about whether we should have a policy that is specific to buildings and school facilities that basically reiterates that very point, that Morristown schools will not have political activities on its campuses. There has been some debate in the past about whether we can. And I think that if you're going to be discussing the political activities as it pertains to support staff, perhaps there may be some discussion about this issue that we talked about in the past as it pertains to hosting political activities on school grounds, because I don't think it should happen. I think there's perhaps, or at least some people believe there's ambiguity as to that point. And so I would ask that the committee review that and consider whether we do want a policy that makes it absolutely clear that political activity will not take place on our school grounds.
Yeah, no, I think it was flagged in light of a change from facilities to premises. So it was like a language which was then flagged in the context of like, we don't have a policy for one group, but we have a policy for another. So trying to sync that up, but what you're describing is an offshoot of that for sure. So sounds good.
And we did talk about that as a committee and agree that we would address it going forward. So it is going to be on the agenda for a future policy committee meeting, because I share your sentiments.
Just since we're on that, I'm curious, is there guidance or definition around what, because I see this is where the problem is. What is political activity? Is a, sitting politician serving our area coming to school to read a book? Is that political activity? Is it a campaign event? And that's what I'm wondering, like, is there any guidance on that? Or is that something the committee has considered?
I think, yeah, I mean, and that was sort of the discussion that we had over the summer. And I think it's sort of, it when you see it. Like I would imagine that, even if it's a sitting politician showing up to campus in a vote for me type t-shirt or something along those lines, that would be considered political activity. But I think there was disagreement about that.
Yeah, well, we have to figure out, is it coming in a t-shirt with signs to a Veterans Day activity or just coming to a Veterans Day, that kind of thing. And so I'd be curious, to hear how the committee looks into that. And that's just the kind of depth that I'm curious about.
Yeah, and we talked about that at the committee meeting, how it wouldn't be a clear-cut policy that we could write in the moment and propose, that there were lots of things Melissa even talked about. We certainly wouldn't want to impact clubs that the students have, for example. We want it to be thoughtful around any type of policy of this nature. So we've only just brought it up for discussion, and we'll take all of these things into consideration.
Great. What's going next? Mark, do you, Mr. Villanueva, you want to do?
Sure. You could call me Mark.
Both trying to be consistent.
Let's do that. The Finance and Operations Committee met on March 14th. We discussed the COVID protocols that Mr. Volpe addressed in his opening remarks. And, as the students were speaking, it was just awesome to hear like the excitement of everything that they're doing this spring. And it's palpable, and it all, a lot of it relates to the things that they're able to do now that we're out of the pandemic. We're getting closer to being out of the pandemic, and you can just see it in their faces, and it's great. And I know that there were some that wanted some of the measures that hopefully will be removed early next month to have happened earlier, and I was one of them, but I really appreciate the approach that was taken. And it was evident when we hear how excited that the students are to be moving forward, and we're not hearing some of the, uncertainty that we heard in the past about what could be done, what couldn't be done. So, we talked about COVID, obviously. Mr. Heiser gave us a budget update. I won't reiterate everything that he just talked about. We also discussed the status of our custodial vendor. We have seen some improvements in the cleaning that has taken place with respect to that. Mr. Heiser talked about food service issues. We've had some complaints over the last 24 months or so about the quality of food. And strike that. I don't want to say 24 months because I think immediately after COVID, when we were doing the deliveries, I think people were pleased, but I think more recently, we've had some complaints about food quality. A lot of that is attributed to the packaging and sort of the way that we've had to deliver and provide food to students, given the COVID restrictions. Things have to be individually wrapped, which impacts the quality of the food, and consistent with the theme of getting back to normal. After spring break, we anticipate to have some adjustments to the way that we serve food to more of a normal routine. And so hopefully the food quality will improve. Mr. Heiser also talked about some new equipment that we may be purchasing, including a conveyor style pizza oven or ovens and some griddle tops that should also help improve food quality. Meal prices for 2022 to 2023 will be going up by 10 cents a meal. We have to get up by law, we have to charge $3 by the 2024 school year. So we are incrementally increasing to that number. We discussed the insurance market as it relates to cyber liability. Governmental entities and educational institutions are becoming more frequent targets of cyber breaches, and this is resulting in a hardening of the insurance market, which requires us to get insurance with less favorable terms, including high deductibles and high premiums. So we are shopping our insurance through the JIF as well as privately. And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, James, but security audit is built into the budget for next year, which will help us evaluate the stability and status of our current security measures, which is an important step in my mind, and perhaps could help us get more favorable insurance rates if we demonstrate that we're being very proactive in our cybersecurity. We're going to be selling 2 buses. That's on the agenda tonight, and through a municipal bid process. These buses are picked apart and have exceeded their useful life, and so we'll be putting them on municipal bid, and that's on the agenda, as I said. We discussed Care Solace, which I won't repeat because Mr. Volpe went through it in detail. And the last item we talked about a significant item that we talked about was with respect to the rental rate that we charge to the recreation department for a summer program. They get a they get our most favorable rate. Our goal is to break even. We don't want to make money off of the rec department for the programs that they run out of the UES. And so the rate that we charge generally breaks us even. Sometimes we may lose a little bit, but the committee is supportive of keeping that rate in place. And so that is about it. Any questions, comments?
Seeing or hearing none. Communication. We did not have a meeting in March that I can recall. Last one was February 23rd. Yeah. It was before. So, and Dr. Alberti's not here tonight. Anyway, to my knowledge, nobody's speaking to that. So, okay. Yeah. I was going to,
Yes.
and we should reiterate, please fill out the community survey. And I'll just put another plug in for, we need community members who are not necessarily parents or employees to fill out the survey. So I, for one, asked my mother to send it to her bridge club. Everybody at the Evergreens, like we'd like to hear all their opinions as well. Yeah, well, yeah, my mom likes to be useful.
I believe we have a communications meeting on the 30th.
30th, okay. All right, thanks for that. All right, so any other off-board committee reports? Is there anything from any of the, Cheryl? Excuse me, Ms. McCopolis.
I always get the tricky one. I do have a quick update. I was not able to attend the More Arts meeting last month or earlier this month because the budget workshop conflicted. But I did want to share a quick note about their scholarships are open for seniors, and the portal is open now on the website. And so I'll just read this to you quickly so I don't misrepresent anything. The scholarships are non-competitive and needs-based. They're not needs-based. They're designed to recognize those students who have participated in the fine and performing arts in any capacity, even if they have not been enrolled in the programs at the high school, i.e. like a dancer who has no course offerings. So they do not need to be majoring in the arts in college to receive an award. There are a few targeted scholarships for which an essay is required, and only one of each is given. The majority of them are given in unlimited numbers as long as there's money to do so. So I encourage you, if you know somebody or want to share this information, to check out the More Arts website and look into the scholarship.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else?
Unfortunately, I missed the speak meeting last month, but there is a meeting this Thursday at 9:30, and you can join. It's via Zoom, and you can go on their Facebook page and find the Zoom link. And if you can't find it, email me and I'll make sure you get it.
Okay, great. Thank you, Ms. Akara Burns. All right. So at this point, we will finish the committee meeting reports. We'll move to our public comment. This first public comment period is about agenda items. So we welcome public comment on agenda items. Please come to the mic, state your name and address. You will have 3 minutes to speak. And as you know, this isn't necessarily a question and answer period. So follow up with an email or a direct conversation. That would be the best way if you seek an answer. Please also do not address board members or people on the dais individually. And we expect and know people will be respectful when making public comments. So with that, would anybody like to engage in public comment? Oh, sorry. Motion to open public comment.
So moved.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed, abstentions? Sorry about that. I'm too eager to get to it. All right. We'll take that as a sign. Okay, motion to close public comment.
So moved.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed, abstentions? Okay. So now we will move to reports to the board. So this contains, what's that? Oh, okay. Several items, the business administrator, board secretary, financial reports, treasurer reports, cafeteria reports, the approval of budget transfer and approval of bills. So I will entertain a motion for approval of items 1 through 5.
So moved.
Thank you. Second.
Second.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Okay. Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed, abstentions? Okay. Thank you, that carries. Next, recommendations of the superintendent. So we have policies and procedures, first reading, the ones that were mentioned, second reading. Let's see, And so I will entertain a motion for approval of items 1 and 2, please.
So moved.
Any comments or questions? Okay, hearing none, I'll call for vote. All in favor? Aye. Any abstentions? Opposed? All right, letter B, number 1, Burlington County Alternative School Placement for 21-22, home instruction, same period, homeless placements, same period, special education in district placements for 21-22 as well. I'll entertain a motion for approval of items 1 through 4. Thank you. Thank you. Any questions, comments? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? All right, moving on to letter C, finance and business. Travel and related expense reimbursement is number 1. Number 2, adoption of the tentative budget, which we are all very familiar with now. So for these 2 items, I'll first entertain the motion to approve.
So moved.
Thank you. Second. And Mr. Heiser, may we have a roll call vote? Oh, I'm sorry. Discussion, questions, comments. Yeah.
I wanted to make a couple of comments about the budget and ask a question or two perhaps, but this is obviously my first time being part of the budget cycle. I spent a lot of time in the workshop and then subsequently in the office hours. So thanks to Mr. Heiser for your patience in supporting me through this process. It was incredibly helpful. One big area of focus for me was the 2% tax levy and pressure testing whether or not we were, having taken it the past couple of budget cycles, whether we were in a state of being where we were kind of automatically assuming a 2% levy into our base budget, or were we really kind of taking out a sharp pencil and pressure testing whether or not we needed to take it to the max increase or take it at all. So that was something that was a hyper area of focus for me. Spent a lot of time with Mr. Heiser. I want to echo the sentiments that Mr. Volpe shared at the outset around things that we didn't want to cut, like the modern and progressive curriculum offerings that we have, the busing that we do as a courtesy beyond the state mandated guidelines, things like extracurriculars and co-curriculars and all of the other special programs that make our district unique and high quality. So with all of that said, I looked holistically at the budget and I felt really confident in the systems, processes, and controls that we had. I also very much appreciated the workshop where Mr. Volpe and subsequently Mr. Heiser during our office hours, you talked a bit about the go forward process. This is an extraordinary year from an inflation standpoint, and hopefully this unprecedented, haven't seen it in 20 years, inflation rate will go back to a closer to normal state in subsequent years. So that coupled with some of the enhancements that you've both spoken about making to the budget cycle for next year, which will begin in November, really get me excited about the future and being part of this board at the outset of the budget cycle for the next fiscal year. With that, could you comment very briefly on some of the enhancements that you intend to make to the budget process going forward? I don't know if it's best for Mr. Volpe or Mr. Heiser to comment, but I think that the public would appreciate hearing that.
Sure, I can address a couple of these. First, we're going to be starting it earlier, number 1. Number 2, we are going to be looking at how we allocate building-based budgets rather than simply rolling them over. And I would reference it rather than saying a zero-based budget, a priority-based budget, because we all know that we're not starting at 0. We're going to have first grade, we're going to have second grade, so we're going to look at priorities. And one of the things we'll be looking for at this time next year is, the offerings that we have that are beyond, say, the state mandates or things we're required to do. What's the the cost of that, and what's the per pupil cost of that? How many students are taking advantage of that? And we can make decisions based on that too. There will be more hyper specifics, but globally, those are some of the big picture items that we'll be looking at next year. And Mr. Heiser, did I kind of encapsulate everything there? Yeah. So from a big picture point of view, that's how we'll be approaching it.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I swear that's on purpose. Just a process question. So the vote tonight is to take the budget to the county, and then it comes back to the board in April for a final approval. So what happens between the county, the county looking at it and it coming back to us for a final approval, and what can we expect to happen within that process?
As a business administrator, hopefully not much. So typically, once the county reviews it and approves it, that's their stamp to say, go ahead and advertise this budget. If for whatever reason, the board still does have authority to make changes to the budget at that point. However, if the board makes changes to the budget, it has to be done through the county, and we have to communicate exactly what those changes were and what drove those changes. So there is a vehicle for it. It's not common, but it's not, I don't want to say it's a 60-40 type thing, but typically the budget that you submit to the county is the one that you're then approving for adoption in April. When there are changes, they have to be communicated back to the county, and then the county has to approve those changes.
I just want to say that, similar to how Jill is feeling, I've learned so much through this process. Mr. Volpe, Mr. Heiser have been, the whole central administration team, I think everybody's been fantastic in educating, answering questions, being very open. I appreciate the desire to keep the things that are all valuable to us. As I've been pretty vocal about, I'm challenged by the tax levy. And I understand all of the reasons why it has to be in there. I guess in my mind, as you're going through this tonight, one of the things that I'm thinking about is and I don't know the best way to say this, but what does a budget without the tax levy look like? Because I know we've been fairly, within range of actuals every year to our budget. So I'm just trying to, I'm really struggling with putting more burden on our families for, third consecutive year, I think it is. And I'm just trying to understand and wrap my head around the implications of not having the tax levy in there and what that would truly mean for the district. I don't mean to ask such a big question. I'm just really trying to understand it. This has been a lot.
No, I think I can answer that pretty succinctly without complication. Pretty much everything that I had mentioned on those 5 slides at the end, they'd be gone. And Mr. Heiser, approximately how many, we'd have to balance it, probably for every 1%, about 8 to 10 staff members. So if we're talking about 2%, then we're talking, about doubling that, about 16 to 20 staff members. And there's no way that if I were to eliminate 16 to 20 staff members that I could keep all of the programs that we would have. So that's what a 0% increase would look like.
And you have said that before, so I apologize for asking the same question. But again, this is a pretty heavy decision, I feel, especially being new to the board and just learning everything. Just for my own edification, why does it come down to staff members and not dollars? Does that?
Sure. Yeah. Staff members are dollars. The staff members are the biggest part. They're what makes our district go, and they're the biggest part of our budgets. I mean, we could look at eliminating some of the other things that we said we had just valued. We could go towards, eliminating the courtesy busing, eliminating extracurriculars. it means paying for kids one way or another. And the majority of our budget is made up of staff. So if we cut from the smaller buckets, we would not make up the amount that we need to in order to get down to that 0%. There would absolutely 100% be staff cuts.
Sorry, I have another question.
Okay, fire away.
No, I'm just
I'm
trying
happy
to
to
follow.
answer. Yep.
So when do we come upon a scenario where we don't have to take a tax levy and we don't have to cut staff?
Good question. It's certainly not this year. And I would say too, that this is one of the areas that I know I've expressed to the board and the members of the public too, that I believe in a lot of advocacy work. Sometimes there are legislative solutions, not administrative solutions. And I would argue that the 2% cap, not just for this district, but for a lot of districts, forces you away from doing that. I could be in situations where, let's say there wasn't a cap, and one year we had a bad budget year, and I needed to raise taxes, or the board needed to. I want to make clear, I don't raise taxes. The board needed to raise taxes 4.2%. You can go 4.2%. And then next year, if things were good, you could say, okay, we can go to 0 because we were able to lift it up the year before. It's put school districts in this game. Well, if I don't raise it, and we're not doing that, but overall, if I don't raise it to 2% this year, then I'm going to have a lower tax levy the next year. So I better make sure that I do it this year. So it's kind of a shell game in the state of New Jersey that some people are doing. But as far as Morristown goes, I can't answer that question for you, unfortunately. I would love to be able to say I can deliver all services for this school district, pay my employees well, add value to the district, and do it at no cost. I think if I did that, I'd go on a tour and sell a book and be a millionaire and might not be a superintendent anymore. But as we look harder and harder at this budget, we will have to make some decisions about, do we want to continue the offerings that we give? I would say that the answer at this dais is yes, and we'll continue to look for efficiencies. There's only so much paper you can buy in bulk. There's only so much cheap offerings that you can look for a digital service. Eventually, if you're looking to not raise taxes at all, it will affect staff because it's the biggest bucket that we have to go into.
Thank you. I appreciate all the answers. These were just things.
No, that's okay. That's my job. It's what I'm employed to do.
Thank you.
I just quickly wanted to thank everyone in the administration who worked diligently on this budget. And I have to say, all the years of sitting through the budget presentation, this was the clearest, most concise one that I feel like I've experienced. And I feel like I can walk away tonight knowing what additional things you're adding to the budget. And I love that. And I really do appreciate your commitment, Mr. Volpe, to mental health of our students. I think that's incredibly important. And I think that that's something that the community has expressed, that they're concerned about that. And I do really, people move here because we offer this exceptional education. We have wonderful teachers, very involved and passionate parents, and students who are interested and want to excel. And that requires investment, just like anything else. And nobody wants to raise taxes. I mean, nobody does. But if that means that we continue this path of excellence and our offerings, then I support that.
I have another question. Sorry, I'm trying to think about how to say it. We had the budget meeting on the 8th. And there's not a lot of people here this evening. Have we received any questions from the community about the budget or about the tax levy? I feel like in years past, we've heard a little bit more than I feel like we've heard this year.
I won't speak for Mr. Heiser. I haven't had any questions specific to the tax levy. I have had a couple of people suggest that we spend money here or spend money there instead of here. but nothing significant and nothing atypical for any budget process that I've been through. That being said, I have not had any specific questions about the tax levy. Neither is Mr. Heiser, if you didn't hear that.
Have anything that came directly to me or Dr. Snyder. So.
Okay. Well, the reason I ask is because I don't feel like I only have a good beat from, certain people that I talk to, and I'd love to have more feedback on where people stand. I just want to reiterate, and I can't say this enough, sitting on the other side of this table, I agree with Melissa. I feel like this has been more transparent and the greatest learning process that I've been through since I've been on the board, 2 months. And it's a very heavy decision. And I feel like again, central administration, Mr. Volpe, Mr. Heiser have done an amazing job answering questions and making sure that we are not cutting things that are important to us. And I guess my question is, if it's a yes tonight, because we all feel good that we've gone through the process and we've made the best decisions, and then we start to hear more concerns from the community, would that be something that would trigger what we talked about before in terms of the process and any changes?
I mean,
Usually I think it's when these decisions are made that people start to hear about it and then share feedback.
I mean, it certainly could. I'm not going to say feedback from the community does not sway me in any way, shape, or form. But we have people sitting here right now. We've advertised it over a couple of weeks since the board workshop. I can't imagine the amount of concern I would have to hear that would have me suggest a different budget to the board. Because even if people are come along the lines, I don't want my taxes raised. My commitment is what I put up there, are those 5 things. And I would follow through on them. And if the board and the will of the board was, no, we aren't going to cap, that would, or to what everything we had said, that would force me to do things. But me personally, as superintendent and trying to push this forward, like Mr. Heiser said, not a lot of change in between then. That's my budget. You've seen my budget. You've seen what I'm putting forward. And I certainly hope that we get the support to move it through. I understand people can vote however they want, and I have no problem with that. But as far as me getting several dozen, 100 emails saying we don't want care solace or something along those lines, I'll say thank you. I appreciate it. It's what I value, and I think everything in here is important for students.
And I just want to say, I wasn't suggesting that I was not
Nope.
suggesting that at all. If it
No,
came
no,
out
I didn't.
that
I
way,
didn't take it that way. I was
apologize.
just kind of talking.
I was just saying, as a board member
Yeah.
who's really trying to get an understanding and a pulse on the community, as a new member who is just learning this whole process and going through it for the first time. I guess I'm speaking more from a board perspective. I do not expect you to ever change your position. I think you have made it very clear, and you have shown leadership, Mr. Volpe, that personally I want to thank you for, because
Thank you.
that is something that I think we truly need in this district. So I do appreciate that from you 100%. And if the question came off the wrong way, I apologize.
Not in the least. Not in the least.
I was just thinking more
Yeah.
like, as a board member, if I vote one way and then I hear things that make me feel like, oh, I guess I didn't really have a good pulse. That's a learning process I think we're still going
I think
through.
that then process wise too, and I took no offense whatsoever. And I also appreciate the compliments. But I have a very good team here. My administrative team, as well as the board members asking these questions, keeping us on our toes, making sure we're doing everything, dotting I's, crossing T's. It's great to be a part of this. So no offense was taken in any way, shape, or form. And now I forgot what your question was there.
Well,
Okay.
yeah.
Oh, I was going to say, no, if you get questions from the community, if they're reaching out to you, you can direct those to me. You can direct those to Mick. We can push things through our committee structure, see if there are other things that we need to do. So if you're asking more so process wise, yeah, you are one member of the board. I wouldn't take all the pressure on you. send it to me or Mick. We can put it on a committee meeting agenda. We can talk it through and come up with solutions from there.
And if I could, Cheryl, just kind of insert myself a little bit. Because I hear a frustration that I think all of us have felt at one point. And that's that we want people to understand and to know and to have the information that we have for making these decisions. You know, I appreciate, I think you gave a great endorsement for running for the school board, right? Because now that you're on this side of the table, as you pointed out, you do have, I think, a greater depth of understanding and access, but we want everybody to have a reasonable amount of access to all of the information that we have. So I'm encouraged by the communication survey that we're going to do, because what you're speaking about is understanding better, how do we get people to know more, to have those conversations and to be able to have those conversations and you know, basically understand that these are informed decisions and that they're not made lightly, and to give a chance to voice their concerns, right? So I think that's the ongoing work. It's great to hear that we're going to start earlier. I think starting earlier in the process will afford more opportunities for conversation, finding different ways. I'll echo the sentiments that we appreciate the way this information was presented, because I think it was more digestible. And certainly we want more people to digest it. And so the combination of starting earlier, the communication survey, and whatever else we can come up with, because I don't think we should stop, will help, I think, address the concern you have that somebody hears about it after the fact. Why didn't I know that? And I wanted a chance to speak to that. So, Jill.
I just want to add to your laundry list of enhancements going forward, the whole idea of doing the base budgets for buildings on a per pupil basis and ticking and tying things back to our strategic priorities. That's really important to me going forward, in addition to the starting earlier and the other enhancements you mentioned. So I just wanted to say that one more time with emphasis.
Any other thoughts, comments? Anybody wants to share? So sorry, I jumped the gun before. Roll call vote for the items 1 and 2, please.
Dr. Alberti. Mrs. Arcaro Burns.
Yes.
Mrs. Fallows Macaluso. Mrs. McCopolis.
Yes.
Ms. Romano.
Yes.
Mr. Villanueva.
Yes.
Dr. Snyder.
Yes.
Mr. Weeks.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. So moving on, still under the same letter, items 3, travel expenditures, approval request. Number 4, approval of state contract and consortium vendor purchases. Number 5, donations. Number 6, overnight student trip. 7, middle school and high school athletic schedules for spring of 22. And number 8, English language learner 3-year plan approval. I'm sorry, also 9, let's see, there are ESEA Consolidated Grant Amendment number 2 application. 10, Burlington County Educational Services Unit, professional services for 22-23. Number 11, non-resident tuition students for the same period. And number 12, sale of the surplus property. Yeah, okay. 13, the Carasalis Agreement. 14, the Catapult Learning Nursing Services for 21-22. Number 15, the 2020 School Security Grant, securing our Children's Future Bond Act. 16, Food Service Management Contract. 17, School Lunch Prices. Number 18, the SEMI Corrective Action Plan. Items 1 through 17. May I have a motion for approval? I'm sorry, 18. Yep, typo. Sorry, I read what's put in front of me. Items 1 through 18. That correction, I can have a motion for approval.
So moved.
Second,
Second.
thank you. Any
I just had a quick
questions?
question. Yeah, I had emailed earlier today about the number 18, the corrective action plan. Just wanted to get a sense, was this something that we saw with similar districts having this issue? Was this really Morristown specific? I just wonder, in hindsight, was there more we could have done to provide these services? And obviously, I'm assuming now, kind of post pandemic, we're able to provide these services and these corrective measures will easily be met. But I guess I'm a little bit concerned with the lack of services that were able to be provided and how that reflects.
Yeah, I'll let Dr. Tate speak to the service end, but what I can speak to, the reason we've had this for the last 3 years. I believe it's been 3 fiscal years. So the corrective action plan that we've put in place has worked in the sense of when we first started this process, we were achieving like 57% of our projected revenue. We missed our mark by $800. So we were 98.5%, and you have to achieve 100% of revenue. So we were right there. So we have to do this process again, but from everything that we put in place, the correction is there. And it's not necessarily that the services aren't being provided, and I'll let Dr. Tate speak to that, but it's more making sure that they're being claimed once they're provided.
Mr. Heiser, that is correct. The services were provided. It is within the claims. Also, certain licenses are needed in the district to claim some of these funds. And Mr. Heiser, Mr. Volpe and I are looking at that for the next school year in order to make sure those things are in place. Certainly not required by employees to have those certifications, but it is something that we can do to capture more funds.
I just had a quick question comment though. So 13, the care solace agreement, we had talked about how it's on next year's budget, but I just wanted to kind of make a point of saying that this will be something that becomes available this current school year. I don't know if I mean, I'm not putting a date on it because obviously we talked about it in all the committees, but this is something that the community can look to be in existence prior to the end of this current school year with information to follow.
Yes, and I just want to clarify that this was not a bait and switch of any kind. Care Solace was originally brought to us by, was it the High School Home and School Association that brought it to us for implementation this year, and it can be up and running as early as April 1st. And I believe, I don't want to speak for them, that they are going to be helping us out with the implementation for financially for the rest of this year, but we wanted a budget for it next year because we already see the value. So the district will be taking it from there. Did I misspeak on anything with that? No.
One correction. So our
Thank you.
Kat Diambra, our supervisor for counseling services, along with our counseling and our CST, brought the need because they felt that it was an overwhelming need, and they saw this. So they kind of spearheaded finding this resource, and then Home and School graciously, offered to help with the financial cost of it for this year so that we could have the services available immediately versus building it into next year budget, since it was an unanticipated cost for us for this year.
Absolutely. Thank you for that correction.
So we're ready for that clarification. Any other comments or questions about those items 1 through 18? Okay. Great. Call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? Okay, carries. Letter D, employee relations. 1, appointments. 2, retirement. 3, resignation. 4, change in position, hours and start date. 5, leaves of absence. 6, extension of contract. 7, movement on the salary guide. 8, substitutes. 9, Title III tutors. 10, athletics, co-curriculars, clubs, and 11, curriculum. Approval of may I have a motion for approval of items 1 through 11, please?
So moved.
Second? Second. Thank you. May we have a roll call vote, please, Mr. Volpe? I'm sorry, Mr. Heiser. One more over. Oh, questions, comments on any of those?
Dr. Alberti. Mr. Arcara Burns.
Yes.
Mrs. Fallows Macaluso.
Yes.
Mrs. McCopolis.
Yes.
Mr. Romano.
Yes.
Mr. Villanueva.
Yes.
Dr. Snyder.
Yep. Yes.
Mr. Weeks.
Yes.
Thank you.
Carries. All right. Let's see, 10, suspensions. Letter A, suspensions. B, suspension, superintendent's HIB report. May I have a motion for these items, please?
Second.
Any questions, comments? Okay, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? All right, next is the information only portion. That's all available there. May I have any comments about old business? Hearing none, new business?
So just reflecting back on the last Board of Education meeting in, I think, February at some point in time, there was public comment from a number of individuals about things that they were passionate about. One person spoke about the experience at lunches being different across the schools. And Mr. Volpe, you had made a commitment to lean in and assess whether there was an opportunity to change lunches or do things differently. You spoke about this at the policy committee a bit, I believe, or maybe communications. So maybe you could just share with the public and kind of close the feedback loop there.
Happy to do so. And I had a chance to speak to Ms. Powell at UES because I think that's where the question was. And I've been over to UES several times. Although students are sitting right now in desks and rows, I can assure you that they are turning and talking and they are socializing. And I had already I've spoken to Ms. Powell as well as all of my principals about taking a look at your lunches. And I'm anticipating, again, that I'm going to be rolling back some COVID restrictions next week. And schools are going to be making more adjustments and changes as it goes forward. The only thing I do want to, I don't want to raise expectations too high, because when I announced the rollback prior to my arrival, in order to make cafeterias work, we actually moved like tables from buildings to buildings, and cafeterias became gyms and gyms became cafeterias. So I just want to make it clear, it's not going to happen like that. My principals are preparing to make those recommendations, but it may take over a weekend. Certainly, I would think by the time we're back from spring break, things are going to look very different. But I know that my principals are aggressively looking to see if these things can get done over the weekend in between. If our data stays clean as it is right now, and once they get that recommendation from me. So in short, I have been there, I have seen it. Kids are socializing, and I do expect that we're going to see more changes after my announcement, my hopeful announcement next week.
Thanks, I appreciate it.
I have just one, hopefully quick thing, and I'm not even sure that this is the place, but Roberts Elementary School does an amazing program with their lunches. And I don't know if everyone is familiar with it, but, and I'm sure I'm going to get this slightly wrong. Basically, there's a fridge in the cafeteria. When the kids have something that they take from the cafeteria line that they don't like or they don't want to eat, they put it in a bin in the middle of the cafeteria for anyone to take it if they want. Like a kid goes home at the end of the day, they're hungry, or they know maybe they won't have something after school, they can take it. When the lunch is over, the bin goes into the fridge, and then once a week, that food goes to a food bank. A volunteer from the bank comes and empties the fridge, and then any food, I don't want to say not fit for human consumption because I think I'm being dramatic, but really squished up apple or whatever. I believe that they donate those things to a local animal rescue. And I know that this is really not the place, but I want to see this program in every school in this district because I think it is exceptional and we're an exceptional district. And I think this is a great way we could give back to the community. So after this, you can tell me what I need to do or who I need to talk to kind of get it rolling. But it's just one of those things that Roberts does because they're Roberts and my kids don't even go there. But so thank you.
Well, yeah, I can address first time I'm hearing of it. So I'm very proud to hear of that program. Let me see what I can find out administratively, what we're doing, if we're doing anything in other buildings, if it's something easy to do that may not even rise to the board level. If I can handle that, great. If not, and we need to take some kind of board action in some way, shape, or form, I'll bring it back here.
find any issue with it coming up here. All right. Any other new business? Okay, thanks, everybody. All right, so now we'll move into our final public comment period, and this is the more general one. So I will entertain a motion to open the second public comment period.
Second.
Movement, second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so as we move into public comment again, remember, please come to the mic, state your name and address. Please be respectful in your comments. You'll have up to 3 minutes to speak. And floor is for whomever comes up.
Hi, Lisa Trapani, 350 Bridgeboro Road. That program you mentioned, that was mentioned by Mrs. Marquare Burns, was started by two paraprofessionals at Roberts, Vicki Wolf and Sally Wilson, because they were tired of seeing the waste that goes on. So they're two MEA staff members who started that and maintain it and make sure that it's followed through on. So, thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks for that additional information.
Good evening, everyone. Billy Danielle Thomas, 539 North Church Street. Having been present for the special meeting addressing the budget and the very comprehensive and thorough presentations of Mr. Volpe and Mr. Heiser, I'm very appreciative of the information that was shared in such a transparent fashion. As a community member, it was very helpful for me to hear and see those things that the board and administration is contemplating. Additionally, I applaud and appreciate the careful and intentional considerations that each board member has taken in review of the budget. In listening to the comments and questions presented at that special meeting and this evening, I walk away with the feeling that the interest of our most important stakeholders, our students, are in very good hands. So I just wanted to share that. And thank you. Thank each of you.
Thank you.
Hello, Dan Miller, 301 Springhouse Lane. As of this morning, there are still those dopey mask required signs up on the high school. I can't speak to all the schools, but and the high school. So I don't know if that's something that is taken care of at this level or if it's a per school basis, but you know, we're a school district that goes above and beyond. So it's about 10 days too late. Oh yeah, and we spoke about the whole address thing that I have to say my address. Is that a rule or is that just something that we do?
Addressing individual board members?
Yeah, when I give you my address.
These are, oh, the address.
Yeah.
Oh,
No, not at all. You can come on over, we'll have a bourbon. But I just think it's a silly rule to have. Sure, go for it.
Did speak about that. I shared,
Right. Cool, very good. I think that would be a good thing, especially if someone comes up here and it's not comfortable, like you said. But if we could take those signs down, because it's probably about 1.5 years too late, but 10 days even later. Thank you.
anyone else? Okay. Seeing no indication of anybody else coming up, I will entertain a motion to close public comment.
So moved.
Second. All in favor? Aye. Okay, may I have a motion for adjournment? Well, that should be everybody. All right, all in favor? Aye. Opposed, abstentions? Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful rest of your evening. Get home safely and enjoy spring.